When somebody asks you what you are, you will say, well, I'm a human. But you say that because everybody agrees that what human represent. Oh, I'm energy, I'm light. But what is the truth? The truth is that you don't even know what you are. You know that you are, that's true. But do you really know what you are? Do you think you know what you are? I don't think so.
I have woken up in other people's bodies where I know I'm not in my own body, where I'm looking through another person's eyes and looking out at the world that they see, and it ain't me that I'm seeing.
Well, it turns out that 50 years ago, we couldn't even think of this as a strange idea. 30 years ago, you couldn't talk about it over the dinner table. But what's happening now?
Now you set the intention to find something and to align with something, it's going to come into your existence.
Knowing that I am a soul and that all of the people that I interrelate with are souls completely alters my perspective of how to live life day by day and moment by moment.
How do you give them that knowledge, or how do they come to know for themselves that there's more?
I see a dumbing down of America right now. It's a dumbing down that I do not think is best. I think it is appeal to our lowest nature as opposed to our highest nature.
Humankind, mankind, consciousness itself is evolving into something that it wasn't before. And we're part of that. We're one of those cogs in the wheel on the evolution of human consciousness.
What we're evolving into is what we as human beings create. It's an evolving process. We're in a total process that's evolving all the time, and that we are part of the creation of it.
As all civilizations before us have asked the question, who are we, how did we get here, and what is this really all about? Our scientific cosmology at that point, and even today, suggests that it's all a cosmic accident. And of course, opposing that is the idealist cosmology, which says that consciousness is the fundamental stuff, and that all matter arose from concepts in consciousness. So here we had what science was telling us about our origins and our traditions, normally our religious traditions.
I draw a distinction between spirituality and religion. A religion is when a group encodes certain beliefs and traditions, and an individual is either born into that group or joins that group and adopts those beliefs and traditions for their own. A path that's spiritual is often more individual, where someone might even be a member of a religious group but then has a profound experience, such as a near-death experience or a personal
mystical experience of the divine, and then the religion doesn't fit anymore. It doesn't necessarily mean the religion is wrong. It's just that people are having a more direct experience in which it's not so much belief anymore, but an actual knowing, or what I call faith.
Always my interest in magic is what keeps me going into the study of the weird stuff like life after death and who's the big G? Is there a big G? Or is it just all a big law of the universe that we exist like this?
They put an image of God like a very old man with long beard, or like a human with the head of an elephant. You see, all those traditions projects what they believe is God, and it's obviously just mythology. Even that mythology, it came because represents something that was true, and now what the religion project is images that have nothing to do really with God.
We are in true nature sitting around a campfire with the light of God shining upon us. Behind us in the forest are dancing silhouettes of our persons sitting around the fire of God, the light of God radiating, and it is the shadows, the silhouettes on the forest behind us. Those dancing silhouettes are what we are now in the physical body. There's no substance to them, no permanence to them, they're just dancing silhouettes. The true, permanent, solid reality is us sitting around the light of God.
The basic matter, the flesh, the emotions, the feelings, nature that we have as humans is not markedly different than what animals have, and certainly we see that in the higher primates who are closer to us in not only their DNA but in their behavior and in their social behavior and their interaction with one another. So we cannot assume any longer that we're really not animals, that we're apart from nature in this regard. That's an old myth that's utterly wrong. We call our intuitive capabilities our sixth sense, and that's just dead wrong. They should be called our first sense. We have become more left brain and screened out these intuitive right brain capabilities that seem to be natural, that seem to be a part of our basic nature.
If we go back in time, anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 years, if we go back in time that far, we discover that most cultures of the world were mystical. And mystical means that the soul has continuity. Mystical means that we exist in body and we exist in spirit. What has happened over the last 1,500 years is that we have become very scientific, we need to be very grounded, and many groups of people have lost the belief structure that the soul has continuity and lives lifetime to lifetime and in between lifetimes.
Belief systems have been handed down and handed down through the ages. Now, you have an opportunity, through what we do, in a way, to explore that. You know, look into that belief system. Can you turn that belief into a known? Or is it just a belief system? The only way you do that is through exploration. That is the key.
From space, the heavens are 10 times as bright because of the lack of intervening atmosphere. So that means 10 times as numerous stars. So what happened is I was looking at that. And as I had learned from my astronomy studies and my astronomy studies at MIT inside, a unity, a connectedness to all of that. And that was a new experience. It was a powerful experience, an ecstasy, accompanied by a blissful feeling. And this continued when I had a few moments to look out the window, all the way home for 3 days. And I realized I had to understand what this experience was. It was far beyond anything I had experienced before.
33 and a half hours after they landed, Alan Shepard and Edgar Mitchell lifted off in the silent vacuum of the moon.
SM engine is armed. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0. This is the other ignition. What a liftoff. And liftoff. Roger ignition. Switch over. 10 seconds. Roger. Hey, baby. Switch is good.
It's probably being more accepted today because so many more people are having these experiences, are awakening to these experiences, and are questioning a little bit more. And I think, again, this is part of the evolving process, that everything's evolving. And so we're evolving into becoming more awake and more conscious of the energy of who we are. You know, it's the old saying that we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Of course that the soul exists, but people misinterpret what is soul. They create that it's a ghost. No, it's not a ghost. The soul is a force. It's a force that begins in the moment of conception.
So here we had what science was telling us about our origins and our traditions, normally our religious traditions, coming out of our cultures, telling us something else. It occurred to me that the truth was somewhere in between, and that maybe we needed to re-ask these questions to see if from the point of view of a space fair, maybe there's some new answers. And it seemed to be that the nature of consciousness was the question to ask, because that was the great enigma. Was consciousness just accidental, as science would have, or was it the fundamental stuff, as most cultural idealist traditions would have?
The problem we have is to find some meaningful definition. By meaningful, either one that can be experimentally demonstrated through science, objectively demonstrated, and if not that, at least some meaningful definition which allows one further insight into the nature of reality.
You've asked this question about what happens to me, what happens to who I really am if I'm not in the physical body. And I would say, what happens to the person who is having a dream? You're in the middle of a dream, and then suddenly you wake up. Well, what happened to the thing you were during the dream? It just sort of vanishes.
We're stuck in metaphor, and that's where we get into all this trouble, because we think of it going somewhere. But how can it go if there's nowhere to go? There's no, I could say, well, my consciousness goes from here to Memphis, Tennessee, and that's where I'm going to be. That's where my consciousness is going to be buried, because I like the Memphis blues. Or my consciousness goes to the planet Mars because I always wanted to be there. But it doesn't go anywhere because it doesn't have any place to go to. It is omnipresent.
If we study the concepts particularly of Hinduism and other belief structures that are tied to the Sufi belief and the Zoroastrian belief structure, again we find that those belief systems, beyond the shadow of a doubt, believe that we remain in body. When our soul dies, our soul is exited out of our bodies, and our souls will live again in a body.
The Eastern mystical point of view, and what I think quantum physics is suggesting to me anyway, is that that's not the whole answer. That somehow matter comes out of mind rather than mind coming out of matter. And that changes things. Or maybe better put, both mind and matter are different illusions of this deeper reality, which is neither mind nor matter, but somehow both.
So quantum mechanics has been around all of the 20th century. It is the major development of the 20th century that has allowed most of our physics technology and our new modern technology to be what it is. It also allowed the thinkers of the period to realize that body-mind were interactive, and that maybe we were going to have to look at consciousness after all within science. Whereas before it had been considered the realm of theology and philosophy.
One of the concepts is that consciousness itself is a non-local phenomena. That means in consciousness we are unified everywhere, every when. It is our focus of attention or our alignment, what we pay attention to in one particular moment. Right now I'm paying attention to being in the body. But that doesn't mean that I don't exist everywhere, every when. All particles, all things have these dual components, a local manifestation and a non-local existence. So perhaps then being more than our physical bodies is identifying with, paying attention to that non-localness of who we are.
So existence and information are the basis not only of our being, but our knowing, why we know anything at all.
Spirit is the fundamental vibration of nothing. But by nothing I mean the absolute void of which everything comes. It's the spiritual vacuum, if you will, the void out of which everything arises. It may be related to the physical vacuum, which we know is capable of, once being energized, of producing particles and antiparticles, which is the particle-antiparticle circus, which arises from particle physics that we know about. Because mind, consciousness, this mysterious essence of who we are, doesn't have a space-time coordination. The common thought is it's as big as the body, and it'll last as long as a lifetime. You're born, you live, and then you die. And then your body decays into dust. And before that you were just dust and eggs and water, and starts fertilizing in DNA and blah, 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 and all electrical sparks start flying, and pretty soon there's a fetus, and the fetus becomes a baby, and all of that, you know, is somehow the notion that consciousness is contained within the unit of the body.
So basically, when our soul is new, when our soul is young, is born, we might say, we are assigned a spirit guide. That guide then works with us, whether we're in body, whether we're not in body. That guide has higher wisdom, is almost always more experienced as a soul than we are, sometimes dramatically more experienced, sometimes only minimally more experienced, depending on how quickly we progress.
I feel that each of us has a group of guides that assists us and helps us in our daily life. However, my clients tell me that they often meet a master teacher guide in their life between life experience who is responsible for overseeing their soul's progress from embodiment to embodiment. And this guide may or may not be intimately involved with their daily life, but is responsible for overseeing their progress over many, many lifetimes.
Can't scientifically prove any of this stuff, of course, and that's where anybody who's scientifically and logically and rationally minded will dismiss all this as being, if it's not scientifically provable, it doesn't exist. Of course, you have to take into consideration that most of the things we do in life are not scientifically provable. In fact, the stuff in life which is scientifically provable is probably less than 10% of everything we do. But yet we rely on scientific provability as being much, importance in our life. We look at anecdotal evidence, and there's so much of it right now. Death experiences, children that are born with memories of aunts or uncles or even grandparents that had died years before the child was even born. There's many cases of this in India, of so-called reincarnation memories. I don't know, if you read these accounts, they seem to be pretty sensible to me.
And that has allowed us now to take quantum physics and start to explore it in quite a new way in the last several years, and to open brand new doors that have never been opened before in understanding ourselves, in understanding the deepest realms of bio-nature, and understanding consciousness itself.
I have woken up in other people's bodies. Now that's really weird. Where I know I'm not in my own body. Where I'm looking through another person's eyes and looking out at the world that they see, and it ain't me that I'm seeing. It ain't my world that I'm looking at. One time, I woke up, got out of bed, went to take a whiz, and I walked inside in the bathroom in my log cabin, stood on the toilet, just about to pee, and suddenly I realized I didn't go to sleep in a log cabin. There's no log cabin where I was. What the heck am I doing in a log cabin? And that's when I realized I was in somebody else's body. He was whizzing, and I was there watching.
More and more mainstream America, if you will, are opening to these type of experiences because so many people are now having them, or recognizing they're having it and being awake to having it. I think there's a coming together of, let's say, science and spirituality. It seems that it's more of a coming together of that. And when I say spirituality, not necessarily religion. My father was a successful businessman in New York back in the late 40s, early 50s. He was the producer of over 50 radio shows. And being the left-brain successful businessman he was, when he started having these out-of-body experiences, he really questioned what and why was this happening to him? What was this out-of-body state? So he looked to Western science to give him the answer, which is how we came up with the process known as hemisync, which is a sound technology. And in using certain frequencies in the sound technology, combinations of certain frequencies, we're able to help people move into these different states of consciousness, different states of awareness.
We
have means to let people know they are more than their physical body. And knowing you are more than your physical body is the beginning of knowing that you survived physical death.
He influenced a lot of thinking, and because of his books, a lot of people began to experiment with out-of-body experience. I think I got influenced by it because it no longer became something I didn't recognize when it happened. The problem is, until somebody like Robert Monroe steps into the world and says, this is something that happens, people don't try to do it. They don't. It may have happened to them, but they don't. It's like a blur. You don't see it. When somebody says, "Ah, this is that," then you begin to recognize it when you have that experience.
The ability to tune into this consciousness, to become aware of your out-of-body state, I think is the true question. It's not who has the ability to get out of their body and who doesn't. It's who becomes aware, who has the ability to become aware.
I think the very first time I was floating above my body, and I was near the ceiling, and I could see the ceiling very clearly, and I kind of like started to feel myself drawing down. I don't know whether I was afraid or didn't know how far I was going up, or how high I was going to go, or whether I'd go through the ceiling. I don't know. Some fear mechanism probably drove me back down. When I got back down again, I remember trying to get my hand inside of my body. It was very unusual. It's like my body was a glove, and I couldn't get my hand to fit inside my thumbs. Everything was a little bit, helter-skelter for a while. And I finally got my little finger into the little finger space, and everything kind of fit in. I finally I fit in.
And when astral projection is happening, the question I would personally wonder is, the soul that's incarnate who is experiencing the astral projection, are they projecting into the spiritual realm, or are they projecting into the space that I believe exists closer to Earth, and the space that is between being incarnate and being fully in the spiritual realm and what we experience in life between lives regression?
The only thing we ask you to consider is that you are more than your physical body. Just consider that. And through that, the hemisync technology helps you really move into knowing that, not just believing it, but because it's able to put you into a relaxed state. First of all, that's the key of anything, is to move into a totally relaxed state. And once you're there, you begin to open up and expand into the energy that you are, which is more than your physical body.
And we've known for years and years that when you can be in that very deeply relaxed place, then we let go of our defenses, we let go of blocks and obstacles that perhaps get in the way of exploring, and so from that place of deep relaxation, then we can open up to all kinds of possibilities.
Ancient cultures have been doing this through rhythmic drumming, through dance, and through chanting and rituals for thousands of years in many, many, many cultures. The technology of stereo and Dolby Digital surround sound is something new to the 20th and 21st century. We have found a way to use that modern day technology to do what cultures have been doing for thousands of years. We use an audio guidance system to alter brainwave states, accompanied by relaxation procedures and meditative procedures that allow people to develop an awareness of information and concepts not ordinary to our waking state. This is the bridge for opening a gateway for the out-of-body experience.
The out-of-body experience, the classical kind of out-of-body that others might call astral projection, may be important for some people and may occur for some people, but it's just one piece of a whole range of possible experiences that would be useful in helping one to come to know better their total self.
Well, death is the big unfocus. That letting go. Suddenly, all of those things which were so important to you, almost your whole life, will, in a flash, be totally unimportant to you. It may take a couple of days, I don't know how long, before you finally recognize that you're not that body anymore, or you're not even concerned with the whole life and death drama of that lifetime.
And in the moment of your death, that force dissolve and let go everything. No longer recognize any piece of you anymore. But the soul comes from life, which means from spirit or from God.
Essentially, our soul is waves of light and color. Our soul is energy. And so when our soul is released out of our physical body, essentially what happens is the energy vibrations heighten so that our soul is able to leave our body. And our body is very dense and low and of a vibrational nature. And when our soul leaves at the point of death, those energy vibrations, we might say, speed up. And that's how the soul is released out of the body.
When a person goes through their own death in a past life regression, it's usually very easy for them to leave their body and to realize that they've died. I always take a moment for them to reflect on the life they've just left. It's a very interesting experience for people to realize that they're not really that body. They almost always are above the body looking down. They can see the people in the room, that if their wife or husband is crying over the body, and they almost always describe a sense of relief. And that it's easier for them to have passed over than for the people left behind. And this is something I think is interesting for us to remember when someone has died that's close to us, that we're usually going through much more trauma than they are, and almost always there's immediately a sense of relief and peace, and especially if they've been ill or in any pain.
I have learned to experience death in a peaceful way, where if I was asked that question 6, 7, 8 years ago, I would have looked at it in an entirely different light, with a lot of fear of the unknown and what to expect.
We are living in a physical body that is alive because of us. We give life to this physical body. Mind exists because we give life to that mind. Without us, the physical body will disappear, will become dust, and the mind will be dissolved. What we really are is life, and life is eternal. It never ends. It never begins. But it's shifting, it's growing, it's transforming, and there is nothing but transformation. It's ourselves getting out of that physical body, ourselves getting out of that mind, of that world of illusion.
Think of it as when you're looking through a lens or a telescope or a pair of binoculars. If you look through it and the image is sharp, that's called focused. As you turn the dials, they start to get blurry. That's called defocusing or unfocusing. Now, an unfocused image is that the light from the object is going through many different pathways to reach your eye, so that your eye is getting the light from different directions all at the same time, and it appears blurrier. So if you think of it, it's a good analogy to parallel reality. Parallel realities, you're seeing all the realities coming through at once, rather than just a single reality, a single focus reality. And these two processes, focusing and defocusing, are things that we do naturally as we begin to learn new things, and as we begin to let go of old ways of thinking so we can learn new things again. This is sort of the process of life.
A newly deceased spirit is, yes, very aware of what is going on. It may take time for that newly deceased spirit to recognize that they have in fact died. There are times when the newly deceased spirit remains close to the body that they've just been released from. And that spirit may hover close for a fair length of time. Could be hours, could be days. Both recognizing what has happened for the spirit and taking care of what I might call unfinished business. It reminds me of a story of a client, a soldier, a young soldier, I think 18 or 20 years old, when he died in war. And he was very concerned about his mother. So he spent a great deal of time attempting to communicate with and comfort his mother before he was ready to move on. Then the question we always ask in a life between lives regression is, so how do you do this communicating? How do you energetically connect with someone that remains incarnate? And the descriptions are fascinating at times. It's the soul will say, I send energy into the heart of my mother. And the interesting part is sometimes what's said is that the loved one that still remains in body recognizes the communication, and sometimes there's lack of recognition. And I would hope that through information such as what I'm sharing, that more and more people would come to accept that their loved ones absolutely very often attempt to communicate and let them know that they're fine.
I had passed away. It was a very peaceful death. I had my family around me. Again, that life was kind of a quiet life, a lonely life. There was not a lot of family. I didn't have children, and as I looked down at it, I felt very calm and peaceful and spiritual. And then I experienced a light. It was a bright light, and then kind of a purplish light. And I was just kind of floating along. And as I floated along, I was greeted by my spirit guide, and his name was Peter. And he was wearing a white flowing robe, had a gold cord wrapped around it, with long hair, appeared to be an older person, very calming and very open. And I was then guided along until I saw a building, a structure. What I saw was columns, and it was a big hall. And in the hall there was mosaics on the wall, one wall, and tapestry on the other. Just a huge hall with real tall ceilings.
It is still the great mystery. What is it that's ongoing? What is it that survives? Well, certainly our recent work shows that the information survives. The information in holographic form that nature preserves in this quantum hologram is a record of our life. And in ancient lore, they recognized this as well, but they called it the Akashic record. The Akashic record is the record of life, and was recognized very well by the ancients. We are now starting to see that, and we call it the zero-point energy field with its quantum hologram is the equivalent of, or is like the Akashic record, or they're kind of one and the same. I do not deny that consciousness may be the fundamental stuff, but I don't think you're ever going to be able to prove that directly. In other words, if you can't explain the universe by our normal material, natural means, the way we are trying to do so, then in due course you have to fall back on the supernatural. At this moment, I'm not prepared to do that.
You do not have to fear death. Because, and again, if you experience it, find out for yourself that you survive physical death. And that, not just believe it, actually experience it. And when you experience it, then you know that you survive physical death. My father had no fear of death. My father, because of so many experiences he had, he knew that he survived death. He didn't just believe it, he knew it, because he had experienced it. The key is for you to find out for yourself.
And we find that people may be very familiar with the territory. Once they're out of the body and have kind of said their farewells, they know exactly where they're going and go there. And they're not met by anyone at all, but they're not lonely. There are people who are met by a whole soul group, and it's almost like a party. Like they've got a big welcome home party, and it's very festive.
Then that space in between the planets is what the Toltecs call the Nahual. Now, what gives life to the Nahual, which is light, and what gives life to the tonal, which is matter, is what they call intent. And intent is a force that moves everything and put everything together. I call it life. The Toltecs know that the space in between planets there was not empty. It's full of light. There's no space in the entire universe of change of universe who is empty. In between atoms, in between stars, in between planets, always exists light.
What the quantum hologram is, it's based on the well-known fact that matter emits and reabsorbs quanta of energy, photons, at the most basic level of nature. And that those photons have a non-local interconnection regardless of where they go thereafter. They are interconnected. Take the quantum emissions from any body of matter, from a human to a chair to anything, that you study it as a group, it is carrying unique information in the event history of that object. Wow, this is a rather fundamental discovery, because it is saying that information at the quantum level in nature is as important as in energy itself. What the physicists tell us is that when particles are entangled in a process at subatomic level, and they go across the universe from each other, should they maintain a correlation, a coherence. And if something happens to one particle, it is instantaneously known or recognized by the other particle, regardless of where they are in the universe. That's instantaneous communication. That's called non-locality.
How would one experience that subjectively? What is your subjective experience of non-locality? Many people experience it as an out-of-body state, an out-of-body situation. We've heard about this when we think of a near-death experience. People seem to float out or perceive themselves to be some way distant from the physical body. The question comes up, is there then a separate body or a second body? Many people have a philosophic opinion that there is a spirit body or a soul. The physicists would reflect back and say, well, we don't have any measurement or proof of that, so the in-between road might be a habit. I'm in the habit of feeling myself in this body, and when I become non-locally aware, a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, as a habit, I think I have a body. But perhaps it really isn't. Perhaps I am more than that, more than the concepts of a body. If we can become aware of information that's not available to the physical senses, it's available only if we are non-locally aware. Something in the future, something in the past, something distant in space from us, something that we couldn't know with our physical senses, and that information comes to us, therein lies the proof. How else could we possibly know this but that we were more than our physical bodies?
In quantum physics, not only is it not considered to be crazy, it's considered to be a way to understand the nature of the real reality, the so-called real reality that we're in. And it's used every day. In fact, a whole new field is developed based upon this idea called quantum computers and quantum computation. And in the years to come, we're going to see more and more of this new idea emerging, and parallel realities are even going into them and taking a photograph and bringing it back out again. That may not be science fiction. That may be something we're going to be doing soon. So I think right now this is an exciting time to be thinking about the relationship of mind and consciousness to quantum physics.
So there is the ability for energy to exist outside of time and space. The spiritual realm essentially has no time frame. The time frame exists here on Earth. The spiritual realm exists outside of a time frame. It's very hard to interrelate what happens in the spiritual realm and what happens in the earthly realm. So then people ask about a life between lives regression. They'll say, I desire to have an LBL regression, but which between life am I going to visit?
Well, one alternative is to say they're in alternative realities or worlds or universes even, and that these are there but they're parallel and invisible to us, because once we've chosen to see reality one way, it gets blocked from us to see this other way. It's like blinders that get put on. We can't see the other reality. But in the other reality, the same thing is going on. We can't see the world that we're in, because in the other reality we're seeing that world. And so these parallel realities are also all occurring simultaneously. Now that idea sounds like almost hokum, and I can't blame anybody for saying, oh, that's crazy, how can you have so many realities?
When we travel into the spiritual realm, into the between life, in an LBL regression, we basically, all of our between lives collapse into one another, if you will, and we step into what we often call a now time. So we're learning about our spiritual experiences based on what is happening presently in our earthly life. The spirit world is the spirit world in the sense that we have many belief structures that say the spirit world is segmented. There's a positive place and a not so positive place. That kind of information has never come through in thousands of life between life regressions. And so the spirit world is open to anyone and everyone. We are not blocked at a certain point and disallowed entry depending on what we have or haven't done in our life. The spirit world does appear different, regression to regression. For some souls, particularly for souls who are not of high level of experience, there is almost a meeting place that exists. It reminds me of a train or a bus station where when the soul has left the body, and it comes in to spend time as it's crossing over, there's often a sort of a meeting place where the soul can be met by loved ones, where the soul is assisted in orienting, in adjusting to being in the spiritual realm. It's almost slowing down the process of moving into the spiritual realm.
We have what we call focus levels, and we refer to them as focus levels, different states of consciousness, as numbers. And we simply do that so there's no attachment, you know, through words or whatever. It's just levels. We found a place we call Focus 27. Now my father refers to this as the park. And it was a place he found in his explorations, which is very much like Earth in a lot of ways. You can actually feel the grass and the trees and everything. And it feels very real, but he called it a park. And we've found that there's a healing and regeneration center there. There's a planning center there. It's just, it's an incredible place, if you will.
Well, Focus 27 is a state that many different systems and religions would refer to as heaven. It is certainly one heaven, state where of great joy. It's a state that offers an opportunity for amazing learnings and insight into, and not only insight into, but participation in planning how things might unfold, here, both here on the earth, in individual lives, in other parts of the physical and non-physical world.
We all have soul groups consisting of 3 to 10 or 12 members that are together because we all have something in common. And that's a good question to ask. What is it that brings you all together? What are you doing together in the spirit world? And usually people are very clear about that. And it may be that they're doing work together, or they may be working on similar lessons together.
Went through, immediately my guides were there. Immediately. I didn't go into any chambers, I didn't have any cleansing. My guides were like, what's up, we're glad you're here. And it was literally like, sit down and have a powwow. That was what my whole entire Life Between Life session consisted of. The therapist that I was working with had a lot of interaction with my guides. Apparently they were very high vibrational, enlightened teachers, and they shared a lot of information with her. I kind of acted as a channel to share that information, to have it come through. And most of the information that was covered was specific stuff for me. No predictions of any sort, but getting in, connecting to what was the intention that I had stated for myself. What did I want to experience? What did I come here for?
And the first person that appeared to my right was my son Scott. And Scott was like my soulmate. He was a real old soul. He was 27 years old when he passed away, but had lived such a full life, and it was just really powerful to have such a vivid feeling of being there with him.
Even though nothing frightening ever happens there, souls always feel a sense of intimidation, I guess I would say, when they're called before what we have termed a council of elders or a council of wise beings. And their guide usually accompanies them, and they are almost always in a building or a space that seems very formal. And a group of 5, 6, or maybe even 10 elders come in and they ask questions, and always in the most loving way the person is given some suggestions about how they might proceed as further in the next life and how they can do better. And it's a very serious meeting, but it's not punitive or judgmental in the way that we might think.
The coordinating body of the spiritual realm is comprised of souls that have finished their incarnation on earth. They've progressed to a particular level. They then work at, we use these words higher, lower, and it's hard not to use those words. They work at a higher level of wisdom, but they are ultimately coordinated by a highest level of wisdom that we all choose to label in different ways. But as we progress as a soul, we fine-tune our interest area, we fine-tune our abilities. And then we can, in fact, progress to the point where we don't spend a great deal of time with our cluster group any longer, and we then can spend primarily time with a group that is much more specialized.
Just before I left the soul group, I felt like somebody had placed a hand on my forehead. And I, again felt this amazing energy. And I said, oh, I think they're just knocking in a little extra knowledge into my head and just I'm being healed of anything that I needed to be healed of as far as some of the experiences that I had experienced in my current incarnation.
Do you believe in God? Do I have a particular spiritual or religious orientation? And what I tell people is that it's all one and the same. That the highest level of spirit or wisdom or love or advancement is the highest level that we can call the universe, the Tao, we can call it God, Great Spirit. There are many different terms for this.
We obviously stay very neutral with all of this, because what happens when you come here is you are exploring a lot of your belief systems, and that's a big part of it. And if you find out through experience that your belief system can become a known, that's wonderful, that's beautiful, that's part of the process.
And all of a sudden I looked up and literally saw this bomb drop. And it looked exactly the way you see it depicted in history books and in pictures and on television. And it literally came down like a giant mushroom cloud, and this smoke just started barreling towards us. And I think when you experience trauma, you experience it in slow motion, because it seemed like it was taking a very long period of time to unfold, when in essence I think it was probably 3 seconds, But then everything around me was burning, was in flames. And I remember I had a small child, and I grabbed this small child, and there was fire everywhere, and the only way to not burn, to be afflicted by the fire, was to get into this water.
It was an arranged marriage, 17. He gave me everything, loved me, tatted me, presents galore. And I just did not like him, and I turned my back on him, ultimately causing him to later kill me.
You believe in life after death. You believe that you come back, or you believe in reincarnation. Well, then you better think about how you're leaving this planet if you believe you're going to be reincarnated. Because you better be careful what you might come back to, what you create.
Yeah, I think in China, the idea was that when the Chinese think about time, or think about who they are and what they are, they keep their ancestors in mind. Whereas in our culture, it's the last thing we think about is who and what we came from. Most of us don't even care that our ancestors came from this country or that country. We're Americans. We don't. Ancestors are dead and buried. We don't care.
Regression therapy is utilizing trance or utilizing hypnosis to guide a client to go backward in time, to sort of go through what we might call age regression. So typically for a long, long time, centuries probably, psychiatrists have guided their clients into age regression in this life, looking for lost memory, looking for trauma-oriented periods of time to try to do healing work. So it all is predicated on the belief that our soul has continuity. So we're going back to mystical belief structure, to belief structure that existed prior to approximately 2,000 years ago in most cultures of the earth. where the belief is that our soul has continuity. So we live and we will live again. It's the whole concept of reincarnation.
I was in Europe in the 1600s. I was in my 20s. My name was Sarah. I was living a rather lonely life in the village and just doing craft work, needlework, and wasn't married at the time. And that was my beginnings, basically looking down, seeing what I was wearing, and the description and the picture just unfolded.
I remember a woman who was a little boy in a past life, and it was during wartime in Germany, I think, and she was cowering under a truck, and she could see the puddles of rainwater and the boots of the soldiers, and she was really frightened, and all the emotions came through. She could really feel and re-experience what it felt like to be that little boy and being very afraid. I think it's an important and wonderful experience for a client to experience themselves from a larger perspective than just one lifetime. It allows them to experience different points of view, to feel what it's like to be a different gender or a different walk of life, to experience the kinds of things that were important in different eras. And it really gives them a wider sense of perspective about who they are, and also allows us to understand other people more easily and with less judgment.
The second life that we were in, we were monks, and we lived in the same monastery. And he was more like my teacher. He opened up different areas of religious perspective, beliefs. He introduced me to new things from a very theological place. The only way I can describe it is it was as pure love as I think you could feel. It was really comfortable and really loving and really pure, and our paths were just anchored, and our paths were very deep in our conviction to God and in our conviction to service.
We got into this water, and I couldn't swim, and my child couldn't swim. And basically we drowned. And like I kept reenacting that, the drowning and losing my child. And I would wake up like gasping. So when I went into this state of hypnosis and I relived it, it was very painful and very traumatic, because it was even realer in this state of hypnosis than in the dream state, because I was alert, you know, it was now present day time.
So many people kind of get into that mindset of like, well, who was I in a past life? And for me, that question never really rang true as something that was relevant to who I was or how I was experiencing life today. What rang true to me and what's gotten at in the book and in the whole sort of life in between lives things was a clear sense of who you are as a soul, independent of your current incarnation, your current manifestation as a body.
The second one would be Italy. I was in an Italian village. I was married. We had a lot of ups and downs, and so our marriage was very tumultuous. And he was a butcher. I was a homemaker. And it was very rough times during that time. It was, I think, in the 1700s, if I recall. And so lessons again learned. I related that person to possibly being the person that I was first married to, that I was married to for a number of years. And I had left that marriage. And it was a very therapeutic time for me, because it really opened me up to the possibilities of growing instead of stagnating.
The most vivid one experientially was a whale incarnation. The most sort of vivid like snapshots from that experience were surfacing and seeing humans on boats that were whale hunters, whale fishermen, whatever you want to call them, and just sort of looking at them as they were, you know, killing other whales or trying to kill me or trying to kill other whales in the pod, and having this very sort of calm sensation about the whole thing. Like, almost a little bit confused about why they were so panicked, what was going on, where were those feelings coming from, where was the aggression, where does, very much this doesn't really quite make sense. But at the same time, even knowing that I was, quote unquote in danger, but not necessarily any sense of fear whatsoever.
Mine was, I was a trapeze artist in the circus, and this man was also there. He was a lion tamer. I fell off the trapeze. He was the first one to come to rescue me. I lost the use of my legs, fell madly in love with them, and ultimately we just had a really great life from that. He just took care of me for the rest of my life.
When we incarnate again, we bring with us some of the previous experiences of past lives. We're often not aware that that is what we're bringing with us. And so there are many times when, as humans, we have recognition. We may meet someone and just know, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that we have met them before, yet we have no literal explanation for that. We also bring with us the particular areas of learning of our soul that still, we might say, need work, need progression, and somehow will be guided through those automatically outside of our awareness. So I believe we bring some, if not all, of our previous experiences with us outside of our awareness and continue to focus on some of those issues.
When you go through a past life, you always reflect to see if there's any learnings or anything that you could see as far as who is in that past life who might be somebody in your present life. And I related that to actually my first marriage to my husband that I was first married to.
At this moment, the quantum holographic theory can easily explain the experiences of reincarnation. And in fact, it explains better than classical notion of reincarnation. It explains better why many people feel that they are reincarnations of the same person. Cleopatra, Ptolemy, Jesus, whomever. There are many people believe they're reincarnations of the person. Well, with quantum holographic theory, that's quite possible. It's just information that you can access.
I know that it all makes sense. This is not just a happenstance. I didn't just born and I'm just not going to die. I was born, I chose, I created, I co-created, I came in with a purpose. I picked the people to be my parents for a reason. I took the paths that I'd chosen because of. I came here to continue what I didn't finish. I'm real anchored in that.
Sometimes what I love the most is, and I hear this many times in Life Between Lives regressions, the counsel will say to the client, literally in this manner, lighten up. And I think as humans, as incarnate souls, we often need to lighten up. And when the client wants to hear from their counsel how they are doing as a soul, often the client thinks they're not doing well in their life. And then the counsel will say, you're doing great. Just keep going. You're doing wonderfully.
Because Teotihuacan is like a map where it's guiding you humans step by step, letting go all the reasons why they believe they are not God, until they are put the whole integrity together, and they find out that they always were God, that they was born perfect, and that they are perfect. And from that point of view, you can see that everybody else is perfect. All the humans around the world, they are perfect. They just don't know that they are, because the whole belief system guides them to a different direction.
We'd like to share a piece of this rock with so many of the countries throughout the world. We hope that this will be a symbol of what our feelings are, what the feelings of the Apollo program are, and a symbol of mankind that we can live in peace and harmony in the future.
For many years, I thought a new age of enlightenment was approaching, that delving into these areas, trying to understand the deeper nature of our perceptions, intuitive information, quantum information, and I still think that is the way to the future.
As a soul, do we always have free will to make choice about anything? Absolutely yes. And are we fallible? Do we sometimes make, we might say, not the best choices? Yes, of course. Are we advised by our guides and teachers from a higher level? Yes, we are advised, but we still have the ability to make decisions.
Basically, I believe that we are here to be co-creators with God. We are here to experience oneness. We are here to experience joy. Whether or not you choose to carry all the wisdom and all the knowledge and the knowing of everything, I don't really think is that important. I believe that if you're happy and you're truly happy and you're living your life exactly as you want it to be, you're doing it.
Because everybody in the world can do their best, everyone. We can see other people and we can judge them that they don't do their best, but how do you know? You hardly know if you're doing your best. How can you judge other people that they do or they don't do their best? Only they know, and it's their life, it's their problem really. The only thing that we do is that we give them the tools that they can find themselves, that they can have more awareness.
In the Australian Aboriginal point of view, they see the creatures evolving through dream. That one creature, which is more primitive, and appears as a result of the Great Spirit dreaming for its environment to occur, so it can be there. That creature begins to dream of an environment in which it can't live. That environment is beyond what it can do. It dreams of it, and as a result of the dream appearing, there's genetic changes in such that a new creature evolves which can exist in a new environment. Now, while this may seem like a fairy tale or just simply a story, in quantum physics we're always dealing with possibilities, and we're always looking at how, now currently in our current thinking, we're looking how future possibilities and past possibilities could be coming together to produce transformation in the present moment. And that's a whole new idea, that somehow what has not happened can come back and influence what is happening, and as a result lead to something what we would experience as actually happening.
From this perspective, when we pass from the body, which isn't really happening, what's going to happen is we're going to wake up and remember this funny dream we had. And this will be the dream we're having, because that's the true nature of reality.
I believe that we can have anything we want, that it's all around us. And we can create all of those desires. We are co-creators, and when we see who we really are and we remember that and we stand in that truth, that we have access to anything that we desire.
I was one of the pioneers, as you're well aware, in exploring parapsychology and psychic information, and realized that we were on to something real. It was real, even though we couldn't explain it. But it's taken 35 years to find an acceptable explanation in quantum phenomena.
Well, you can see that it's unknown because you don't ask. Once that you ask, then you know. And the unknown becomes known. Then what we have in the mind can be known if we ask, if we learn to listen. Then the unknown becomes known. What is unknowable, you never will know with the language that we have, with the symbols that we have.
Even when it doesn't make sense to me these days, I trust the universe more and more. And the world doesn't have to explain itself to me. And when it looks really bad from the outside, I have more faith that a person's life is unfolding in just the way that it needs to for their soul's growth and learning. And that thought gives me a lot of comfort.
Many of us spend so much of our lives worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, or just wallowing in things that have happened in the past instead of being in the now. And I think they can learn a lot from just being in the moment and experiencing life and having joy in their life.
As you expand in awareness, what you discover is that when it comes to creation, that one of the things we really can do is create heaven on earth now.
I would say that we are evolving into an intelligent species that has a true understanding of how interconnected everything is, and how connected we are to everything, to the earth and to spirit.
And so I think that leads to looking at what is the point? Why do we come into body? You know, why am I or anyone else incarnate at this time? And I think the absolute bottom line is we are here in body for the purpose of progression, both our own progression and the progression of other souls and how we impact other souls.
And yes, they can do better, but in order to do better, they need to have more awareness, to be more aware. If they have more awareness, the best will be better and better and better.
There's no ultimate destiny because the universe has been created in such a way that we can create new destinies. And I think our ultimate destiny would be to recognize that we are the creators of our destiny.
In my opinion, only by using the best of our rational and our intuitive faculties and the best of our scientific technologies and protocols will we ever be able to tease out of nature these secrets that are very elusive right now.